At 5:41 local time, a cockpit alert breaks the silence over the Strait of Hormuz. It is not loud or theatrical, just sharp enough to make even an experienced pilot freeze for half a second. Inside a US F-35 Lightning II, on a routine patrol through international airspace, a radar spike appears on the tactical display from the northeast. At first, it resembles background surveillance, the kind of ground-based search radar commonly seen along the Iranian coast. Nothing seems unusual yet. Then the signal changes. Search turns into track. Track becomes something more deliberate, more precise, and far more serious. The pilot stays composed. In a fifth-generation fighter, panic only gets in the way. He checks the display again, confirms the source geometry, and holds the aircraft steady for 2 more seconds. That is enough time to see the pattern fully settle. The radar is no longer sweeping the area. It is fixed on him, following, calculating range, speed, and heading. Somewhere beyond the coastline, someone has decided that this aircraft is no longer just another mark over Hormuz. It has become the main point of attention. Far below, the strait seems almost calm. Oil tankers move through the shipping lanes in slow, deliberate lines. The water is smooth. The first light of morning is starting to harden into full daylight. But inside the cockpit, everything has changed. The F-35's sensor fusion starts assembling the picture faster than any pilot in an older aircraft could manage by hand. A coastal emitter, high confidence, one airborne contact lifting from the northern side of the strait. Speed increasing, altitude climbing, heading consistent with an intercept. This is how situations unfold in modern airspace. Not with a sudden flash and not with a threat over the radio. It begins with a lock. The pilot shifts the aircraft a few degrees to the left. Not enough to look evasive, just enough to test whether the radar contact is incidental or fully committed. The signal stays with him. He drops slightly in altitude, adjusts power, and checks again. Still there, still following. Whatever is tracking him is reacting to every move he makes. That means intent. He keys the radio once, voice steady and controlled. Control, Lightning 1. Confirm higher grade tracking from Iranian sector. Possible coordinated air picture developing. The response comes back fast and clipped. External sensors are detecting increased activity near the coast. One fast-moving aircraft is now airborne and heading south toward the patrol corridor. No friendly traffic is operating in that block. No sign of deconfliction. No response on standard guard frequencies. No one says the obvious part out loud. They do not have to. In this part of the world, a fighter launch under an active coastal radar picture means the pressure is about to get very real. Inside the F-35, the pilot begins easing the jet into a more defensive posture without making it obvious. Emissions remain controlled. Every movement stays measured. The aircraft slips slightly lower, making it harder for ground radar to hold a clean picture against the open sky. At the same time, the distributed aperture system and electro-optical targeting system continue feeding him fragments of the story. A heat plume from an engine far off his right rear quarter. Occasional visual cues in the distance. A track file growing more solid with every passing second. Iranian fighter, exact type still unclear. It could be an F-14. It could be a MiG-29. It could be something else. But the exact label matters less than the geometry. The aircraft is moving into a useful intercept position, while the coastal radar keeps doing most of the work. The F-35 banks again, harder this time, then drops lower over the water. Not a brake turn, not a desperate dive, just a clean, efficient reposition meant to disrupt the tracking geometry. He keeps the nose moving, never allowing the intercepting aircraft a stable picture for long. Every second matters now, every angle matters, and through it all, the jet is gathering data, pulse repetition, sweep patterns, timing between the coastal emitter and the airborne contact. The pilot is not just enduring the encounter, he is documenting it. Then the second shift arrives. The warning tone sounds again, faster this time, tighter. No combat pilot mistakes the change for routine behavior. The airborne contact has moved into a more aggressive intercept path, and the radar energy from the Iranian side sharpens once more, as if both parts of the system have finally synced. The F-35's displays brighten with a clearer threat picture. Ground support below, fighter above and behind. This is no random shadowing maneuver. It is a coordinated attempt to trap the American aircraft inside a controlled engagement zone. The pilot exhales once, sharply, and keeps flying. Outside the canopy, the Strait of Hormuz is still filled with merchant traffic and early morning light. Inside, the margin for error is shrinking with every passing second. The F-35 cuts lower across the water, turns left again, and adds just enough speed to stay ahead of the geometry tightening behind it. He still has not seen the Iranian fighter with his own eyes. He does not need to. The aircraft already has. And one fact is now impossible to ignore. Iran is no longer simply observing this patrol, they are trying to control it. The first lock has already happened. What comes next will decide whether this remains a warning or becomes an attempt to bring down a US F-35 over Hormuz. At 5:44 local time, the F-35 is no longer flying a routine patrol route. It is low over the Strait of Hormuz now, moving faster than before, nose slightly offset from its original course, preserving just enough maneuvering space to remain unpredictable. Below, the shipping lane is crowded with civilian traffic. Tankers, escorts, and merchant vessels move through the narrow waterway in steady commercial lines, completely unaware of how quickly the situation above them has changed. Inside the cockpit, the tactical picture grows clearer by the second, and none of it looks accidental. The coastal radar is still active, still tracking, still disciplined. But now the airborne contact has become the main threat. The Iranian fighter is climbing into a stronger intercept position, sliding in from the north and right, using ground radar support to tighten the geometry. That is a dangerous pairing. One platform sees wide, the other closes fast. Together, they can force even an advanced aircraft into bad choices. The F-35 pilot gives them none. He keeps the jet moving through small, efficient corrections. No wild defensive turns, no steep climb, no obvious withdrawal. Just measured changes in heading and altitude, enough to keep any fire control solution from stabilizing for long. In an older aircraft, a pilot in this moment would have to divide attention between radar, radio, and visual scan. In the Lightning II, the aircraft handles much of that burden itself. The sensors are already assembling the problem. The pilot's role now is to manage distance, timing, and intent. A new alert pulses across the threat warning system. Not a missile launch, not yet, but clearly more serious than before. The Iranian tracking picture is tightening. Control, Lightning I, airborne contact now fully committed. Ground support still active. Tracking behavior increasing. This time, the reply carries more weight. Additional U.S. aircraft are starting to shift toward the strait. A wider air picture is forming beyond the immediate area. But for now, the F-35 remains the only jet inside the pressure zone. It is still the aircraft Iran is trying to influence. The pilot drops even lower. At this altitude, the sea becomes part of the equation. Ground radar has to fight through clutter and reflected signal. The F-35's shaping, signature control, and strict emissions discipline all become even more important here. The aircraft skims over the water in a narrow band between control and chaos. Engine tone steady, inputs precise. The message is unmistakable. This jet is not being pushed off course. Then the Iranian fighter makes its first serious move. The contact cuts in more sharply, trying to shift from pure pursuit into a position that could force the F-35 either west into a more exposed track or upward into cleaner radar coverage. It is textbook pressure, not a shot, not even an openly hostile move yet, just geometry. The kind that can corner a pilot into bad choices if he reads the situation a second too late. But the F-35 reads it early. The pilot moves left again, then dips the nose slightly before easing back to level flight. The adjustment is subtle, but it breaks the rhythm the Iranians are trying to establish. The fighter behind has to correct, and that correction matters. It exposes timing, it reveals intent. It shows how aggressively the intercept pilot wants control of the next minute of airspace. And every bit of it is being recorded. Inside the F-35, the electronic warfare suite is quietly cataloging the radar behavior from both the coast and the airborne interceptor. Sweep intervals, power fluctuations, handoff patterns. The pilot is under pressure, yes, but Iran is also exposing pieces of its own playbook with every second this continues. That is the hidden advantage in a fifth-generation encounter. The aircraft does not simply endure threats, it analyzes them in real time. For a brief moment, the Iranian fighter closes enough for the Lightning sensors to sharpen the track even further. Still nothing visible through the canopy. Still no dramatic merge. Just raw data turning into confidence. Iranian fast mover, aggressive approach, coordinated with coastal radar. Not just monitoring, trying to herd. Then the next step comes. A short radio transmission cuts across the frequency. The accent is hard. The message is clipped. No full identification. No attempt at normal deconfliction. Just a warning to leave the area immediately. The F-35 pilot does not waste time arguing over the radio. His attention stays on the sky, because the transmission is not the real danger. The positioning is. By 5:46, the Iranian fighter is close enough that every decision starts to matter faster. The ground radar is still supporting. The intercept geometry continues to tighten. For the first time, the pilot can feel the encounter approaching a line neither side can afford to misread. One more aggressive cut-in, one more jump in radar quality, one more bad interpretation, and the incident stops being pressure and starts looking like an attempt to take down the aircraft. Not yet inside the center of the encounter, but now close enough to matter. Close enough that the Iranian pilot, if he is reading his own sensors carefully, may already understand this is no longer one American jet alone over Hormuz. The F-35 holds course for 2 more seconds, low and fast above the water. Iran believed it was closing on a single aircraft. It is about to learn that the airspace around that aircraft is beginning to close back. At 5:47 local time, the pursuit stops looking like a pursuit. The US F-35 is still skimming low over the Strait of Hormuz, still moving fast, still using a narrow band of air above the sea, where radar solutions are harder to maintain and visual contact comes late. But now the aircraft is no longer responding one move at a time. It is shaping the encounter. Inside the cockpit, the pilot sees the shift before anyone says it aloud. The Iranian fighter is still pressing from behind. The coastal radar remains active, but the geometry is no longer moving in only one direction, because the sky is starting to fill in. Across the F-35's fused display, distant blue tracks sharpen from vague support indicators into real tactical presence. American assets outside the immediate pressure zone have moved close enough to influence events. A wider surveillance picture is now feeding the engagement. Somewhere beyond visual range, U.S. aircraft are repositioning. Somewhere below and farther out, naval sensors are helping stitch together the entire scene. No one rushes in, no one makes dramatic radio calls. But from this point forward, Iran is no longer dealing with a single stealth fighter operating alone. It is now inside a layered American battle space. The Iranian pilot either recognizes that change or he does not. His next move suggests he notices something, but not enough. Instead of backing away, he presses harder. The intercept line tightens again from the F-35's right rear quarter. His angle grows more aggressive, the kind of move designed to make the American pilot feel boxed in without openly crossing into a weapons engagement. That is the strategy now. Pressure without firing. Control without commitment. The Iranian fighter wants the F-35 to turn away first, climb into a more exposed profile, or simply leave the patrol corridor and head west. Any of those outcomes would be enough. No strike would be necessary. A withdrawal alone would count. But the F-35 gives them nothing. The pilot rolls gently left, then steadies. No wasted motion, no dramatic defensive break. Just enough movement to force the pursuing fighter to adjust its nose and spend more speed. From a distance, the correction looks minor. Inside a tactical picture, it says everything. It reveals timing. It exposes intent. It shows how aggressively the Iranian pilot is trying to cut the corner. And the F-35 is capturing all of it. Every radar sweep from the Iranian side. Every change in closure rate. Every moment the airborne track leans on coastal support. The aircraft's electronic warfare and sensor systems continue building a clearer and clearer library of Iranian behavior. This is the part most people never witness. In modern air combat, the first victory is often informational. Before anyone takes a shot, before pilots ever come face to face, one side may already be learning more than the other, can afford to reveal. Iran keeps revealing it. The pursuing fighter now flies with greater urgency, trying to recover the initiative before American support moves too close. On the F-35's display, the track quality is now strong enough to show a clear pattern. The Iranian aircraft appears confident when the coastal radar remains steady, and far less decisive when the geometry becomes fluid. That matters. It suggests the pilot behind is not acting independently. He is operating inside a structure. He is relying on cues, and once those cues are disrupted, his advantage begins to shrink quickly. At 5:48, a short burst of radio traffic cuts across the frequency again. Another warning, another demand to leave the area, the same clipped tone, the same attempt to sound in command. The F-35 pilot ignores the performance and watches the angles, because that is where the real conversation is taking place. The Iranian fighter makes its boldest move yet, edging farther into an attack support position and trying to push the American jet toward a cleaner slice of sky. For a few seconds, the encounter reaches its most dangerous point. The F-35 is low. The Iranian contact is fully committed. The coastal radar continues tracking from inland. If there is a moment when this incident could shift from intimidation into a genuine attempt to destroy the aircraft, this is it. And still, the F-35 does not panic. The pilot keeps the aircraft disciplined and quiet, turns only enough to spoil the setup, and holds a flight path that refuses to offer an easy opportunity. That matters psychologically just as much as tactically. Iran likely expected visible discomfort by now, a sharp defensive break, a sudden climb, a retreat, some clear sign that the pressure was working. Instead, the American jet remains frustratingly composed. Still there, still capable, still refusing to be herded. That is when the pursuit begins to stall. Not dramatically, not all at once, just in the subtle way skilled tactical encounters often change direction. The Iranian fighter starts spending effort for smaller returns. Its corrections become more frequent. Its approach angles stop improving. It is still behind the F-35, still threatening, still present, but no longer dictating the shape of the encounter. And by now, that shift is impossible to miss. Additional American tracks have moved closer on the shared tactical picture. Not close enough to turn this into a full confrontation, but close enough to make the next Iranian decision much heavier than the last one. Push farther, and the encounter expands. Hold position, and the moment slips away. Back off, and the entire attempt begins to look exactly like what it is. A failed effort to force a U.S. stealth fighter out of international airspace. At 5:49, the Iranian pilot eases his angle slightly, barely noticeable unless you are watching the geometry in real time. But the F-35 sees it. The pressure line has loosened. The pursuit is no longer tightening, it is turning. Iran tried to corner one aircraft over Hormuz. Instead, it has flown directly into the outer edge of an American response already forming around it. At 5:50 local time, the most dangerous part of the encounter is no longer the speed. It is the silence. For the last several minutes, the airspace above the Strait of Hormuz has been shaped by pressure, angle, and restraint. No launches, no warning shots, no close visual merge dramatic enough for the world to label it a dogfight. Just a U.S. F-35. Lightning II flying low over international waters, an Iranian fighter pressing from behind, and a coastal radar network trying to turn presence into control. Now, for the first time since the initial lock, the momentum begins to slip. Not quickly, not cleanly, but enough. Inside the F-35, the pilot sees it in the geometry before he feels it in the threat picture. The Iranian fighter is still there, still aft and offset, still dangerous enough that no one in the cockpit relaxes for a second. But the angle is no longer improving. The closure is less efficient. The corrections are becoming more cautious. That matters. In this kind of encounter, a pilot who believes he owns the sky keeps pressing. A pilot who begins seeing new variables starts protecting his exit. The coastal radar remains active, but even that picture is changing. Its behavior loses some of the sharpness that defined the earlier phase of the intercept. The tracking quality does not disappear, but it no longer feels like a system building toward a clean firing opportunity. It feels more like a system maintaining contact while higher command decides how far this should really go. That is the problem with coercive air power in a place like Hormuz. It only works as long as the other side follows the script. The F-35 never did. Below, traffic in the shipping lane keeps moving. Tankers continue their slow passage through one of the world's most important choke points. The sea stays flat and metallic under the morning light, offering no sign of how close the air above it came to tipping into something far more serious. That contrast matters. At sea level, everything looks orderly. Just above it, several minutes of controlled tension nearly changed the entire morning. The F-35 does not chase the moment. That is what separates disciplined air power from emotional decision-making. The American pilot now has support moving closer. He has a stronger tactical picture. He has already come through the most intense phase of the pressure without giving Iran what it wanted. But he does not turn that into a reckless countermove. He stays low, stays efficient, stays exactly where he has every legal right to be. The aircraft keeps collecting data, keeps watching, keeps forcing the Iranian fighter to choose between escalation and disengagement. And that decision is starting to weigh heavily. At 5:51, the Iranian aircraft shifts its vector by a few degrees. Not a turnaway, not yet, but enough to widen the line instead of tightening it. Enough to create breathing room where moments earlier there had been almost none. The F-35's fuse display catches the change immediately. The pilot does not answer with aggression. He holds course just long enough to confirm the pattern. Then it appears again. The Iranian pilot is trying to ease off without making it look like he is easing off. That is common in military encounters where image matters almost as much as force. You do not break away suddenly if you can avoid it. You widen your angle, reduce closure, and shift from attack geometry to parallel presence. You make it look procedural, almost routine, as if the whole encounter had been observation all along. But systems do not care about pride. Systems record movement, timing, and distance. And right now, every one of those markers is saying the same thing. The intercept is losing momentum. One final burst of radio traffic cuts through, thinner this time, less certain than before. Another warning, another demand for the American aircraft to leave the area. But by now, the words are behind the reality. The Iranian fighter is no longer controlling anything. It is preserving space. The F-35 remains frustratingly steady. No flares, no dramatic bursts of speed, no sharp climb to signal victory, just composure. The kind of composure that turns a failed act of pressure into something worse than embarrassment, into evidence. At 5:52, the threat picture softens again. The airborne contact drifts farther from its most dangerous position. The coastal radar remains active, but its role has changed. It is no longer pressing, it is watching. The entire encounter has passed its own invisible turning point. Iran can still remain in the area. It can still observe. It can still show presence. But the effort to control the American aircraft's movement has failed. That is the moment the outcome becomes clear. Iran tried to pressure a fifth-generation fighter over Hormuz using layered tracking, an airborne intercept, and the psychological weight of proximity. They expected discomfort. They expected deviation. They expected the patrol to break west and leave the corridor. It never happened. By 5:53, the Iranian fighter opens the spacing again. This time, there is no real ambiguity left. The geometry is no longer offensive. It is disengaging in all but name. The F-35, still low and clean over the water, remains on mission long enough to make the point unmistakable. It was not driven out. It was not cornered. It was not forced off course. The lock failed. The pressure failed. And the aircraft Iran tried to intimidate is still exactly where it began. Over international waters, under control, and still very much in the fight. At 5:55 local time, the sky over the Strait of Hormuz is quiet again. Not peaceful, quiet. And the difference matters. The US F-35 Lightning II is still airborne, still flying a lawful patrol route over international waters, still holding a steady line above one of the most strategically sensitive waterways on Earth. The Iranian fighter that had pressed from the north has opened distance. The coastal radar that once tightened into an aggressive tracking posture is still present, but no longer controlling the encounter. The immediate danger has passed. The mission has not. Inside the cockpit, there is no celebration, no excited radio chatter. No dramatic declaration that the threat has been beaten. That is not how professional military aviation works. The pilot reports only the facts in short, exact language. Tracking pressure reduced. Iranian air contact increasing separation. Aircraft stable. Sensors recording. Still on station. And that final line says everything. Still on station. Because in a confrontation like this, survival alone is not the full outcome. Presence is, discipline is. The ability to absorb pressure without surrendering the airspace is what separates a tense moment from a tactical success. Iran did not need to destroy the F-35 to gain something meaningful that morning. It only needed to force it out of the corridor, to make an American stealth fighter break off patrol and leave the sky over Hormuz under pressure. That would have been enough. Enough for a headline, enough for a claim of control, enough to argue that layered radar coverage, an aggressive intercept, and several minutes of sustained pressure could bend even a fifth-generation aircraft. It did not happen. Instead, what Iran produced in those 14 minutes became far more valuable to the United States than to themselves. Data. Every radar sweep from the coast. Every mode change. Every moment when ground tracking supported the airborne intercept. Every closure rate, angle correction, and pursuit decision from the Iranian fighter. Every clipped radio warning. Every second of timing between the ground picture and the air picture. The F-35 captured all of it. That is one of the defining realities of modern American air power. The aircraft is not only a fighter, it is a sensor platform, an intelligence collector, and a battlefield historian in real time. You do not pressure a platform like that without teaching it something. And Iran taught it plenty. They showed how quickly a coastal radar network could shift from surveillance to aggressive tracking. They showed how their interceptor behaved when it believed it had the initiative. They showed how heavily the fighter relied on support from the ground picture. And they showed what happened when the geometry stopped cooperating. At first, the Iranian pilot appeared assertive, almost confident, pushing angles that suggested he believed the American aircraft would eventually turn away. But as U.S. support moved closer and the F-35 refused to break, the posture changed. The corrections became smaller, the pressure became less effective. The intercept began to look less like control and more like exposure. That is the hidden defeat in encounters like this. Not the failure to fire, the failure to dominate. By 5:57, the F-35 continues along the patrol corridor for a final stretch before repositioning away from the most compressed threat zone. Below, sea traffic moves uninterrupted. Tankers continue forward. Civilian ships keep threading the strait. Nothing has fallen from the sky. No wreckage burns on the water. No rescue forces race toward an impact point. To outside observers, almost nothing happened. But to those who understand missions like this, a great deal happened. Iran tested the boundary. They used radar pressure, an intercepting fighter, and the narrow geography of Hormuz to see whether they could push a U.S. stealth aircraft out of contested airspace without ever launching a shot. They came close enough to make the danger real, close enough to force tactical reactions, close enough to place a pilot inside the kind of compressed timeline where every second matters and every decision carries weight. But when the moment arrived to either escalate or accept failure, they did what coercive powers often do when faced with discipline. They backed away slowly, not dramatically, not publicly, but unmistakably. The American aircraft never gave them an easy opportunity, never gave them a panicked withdrawal, never gave them the visual proof of dominance they were trying to create. And because of that, the final image of the encounter is not an Iranian fighter driving a U.S. jet from the sky over Hormuz. It is an F-35, still intact, still in control, still flying its mission while the pressure around it fades. That is the lesson. In a modern battlespace, the side that stays calm often takes home more than the side that gets loud. Iran tried to force the issue over one of the most volatile choke points on the planet. They tried to turn tracking into fear and fear into movement. Instead, they handed a fifth-generation aircraft a clearer map of their own behavior and left without the one thing they came for: control. So here is the real question. Was this a genuine attempt to set up a takedown or a pressure play that went one step too far? And if that lock had lasted only a few seconds longer, how different would that morning have become? Share your view in the comments, because over Hormuz, Iran tried to make the F-35 blink first. It never did.